Hi guys, welcome to No One's Worst to Best Survival Race video. Very long name. So, first up we have Argonians. These guys are the only ones to receive a debuff, which basically makes them get cold faster and easier. And we're in Skyrim, so you can imagine that's not very useful. And the fact that they're the only ones to get a debuff kinda bumps them low. And the fact that it's a pretty debilitating one in all honesty is not that great going for Argonians. Water breathing is also never been really that useful, and you can't even use water to escape enemies because you'll probably just freeze to death. So that's very unfortunate again for Argonians, with one of their more useless abilities becoming even more useless. However, a useless ability for vanilla, or almost useless ability, actually has a little bit more relevance in survival, so they got that going for them coming from vanilla. However, they got something special from survival. They didn't just get debuffed from survival. They got raw diet, which allows them to eat raw meat and as well as other raw ingredients. So that's at least going for them. However, the debuff does just kind of put them at a low, and it even takes away from something that wasn't even too good in the first place. So it's kind of unfortunate. Something that could have maybe been useful for Argonians even gets kind of shit on due to the cold fact. That's very unfortunate. However, they do have his skin, which is one of the more useful abilities, allowing them to recover health 10 times faster for 60 seconds. So that's pretty good. It's one of the more useful race abilities. It does lose its potency as you gain more health, as it would get slower, but it's still a useful effect regardless. And I'd rather have health rather than the stamina or the magicka ones, but it's not gonna help it regenerate health in a freezing environment, I believe, so that's not really gonna matter. Just kinda another thing that gets shit on by the Argonians. Maybe they were just nerfing the Argonians, but either way, survival mode is not ideal. It's basically veteran mode. So next up we got Imperials, which would have been the first and worst race on my list. However, they didn't get debuffed like the Argonians did. But they didn't get any buffs either, or have anything useful to begin with to carry over to survival. So they barely make it past the Argonians, and if the Argonians wouldn't have got the debuff, they would have been higher. So looking at their effects and powers, they basically just get 3 to 5 extra gold coins where you normally get gold coins. It's not that big of a deal. It's alright, but it's not particularly useful or anything. Voice of the Emperor, however, is probably the most powerful comm spell in the game, and I don't know how people have overlooked it so much. 60 seconds is not a bad time limit for any effect or whatever in Skyrim. Then the fact that it can be used on basically any NPC, no matter their level, can be cast instantly and on multiple people. I mean, the fact that it can only be used on people and once a day are not that big of a downside compared to how powerful it really is. It basically is a master level spell that only works on people and only can be cast once a day. And actually, I'd say it's higher than a master level spell because it doesn't have any limit on what the level of the NPC is. So Voice of the Emperor is really what they got going on for them, in general, vanilla or survival. Well, it would seem that the Red Guards also don't really change much from vanilla to survival Skyrim, so we're just gonna go over their effects and their power. At least they actually have resistances, which is why they're above, particularly Imperials. A poison resistance of 50% isn't bad and would be particularly useful against poison foes, obviously, which are more deadly in survival and can be quite annoying. So in general, this is pretty nice. And if you find a piece of enchanted gear, like a necklace of 50% resist poison or 100% resist poison, then you're definitely going to be immune to poison, making those foes a lot easier to deal with. You also have Adrenaline Rush, which is basically like Argonian's ability to regenerate health 10 times fast, except this is your stamina, which will allow you to do more power attacks. It will allow you to run away from enemies or just run and travel faster in general. because you do a lot of walking in survival mode, unless you do buy a horse or carriage or something like that. But otherwise, this is going to help you get around a bit faster by allowing you to sprint more. So basically, it's just going to allow you to run around more and do more power attacks. But that's still pretty useful, because you can fight more aggressively, you can escape, and you can travel quickly. So, basically poison resistance, more power attacks, and traveling quickly and escaping enemies is what the red guards are going to be particularly best at in survival mode. So now we're going on to the next race. Next up, we got Bretons. Again, following the trend of the humans before him, nothing really changes in vanilla. They just kind of are the same as they were before. However, they kind of are more useful than some of the other races. First off, they have Dragon Skin, which is one of the more useful race abilities, as it can be absorbed for obviously spells, which can basically make you immune to damage and give you Magicka in return. And it can also take like Dragon Shouts and Fire, and Frost Shouts. It can take diseases, and it probably can take enchanted effects, I'd imagine, too. Speaking of which, we have resisting magic. I don't know if this does resist enchanted magic effects by 25%. Of course, you're still going to take like the weapon damage, of like the base weapon damage of the attack, and you know, still some of the enchanted damage, because you don't resist 100% of magic. But it might just be enough to save your life. As well as 25% to like magic in general means like fire, frost, and shock are covered, and many other magical effects. I don't think it does it for poison or disease or anything else, unfortunately, but it still covers more bases than characters that just focus on one attribute. Especially since most of the attributes you don't encounter that often for you to need it that high that often. And 25% helps you get to a max percent easier anyways with Bretons. So, they're more useful with their magic resistance, which is why they're higher than most. They made it about halfway, so Bretons ain't doing too bad so far. Conjure Familiar is probably one of the most useful, well, useless. No, yeah, I would never say it's the most useful. It is the most useless. But in survival mode, I would say the only useful thing I could find it for is just a very quick distraction for you to possibly escape from danger. But it's very slight, as it gets one-shotted half the time. Maybe just try to cast it when you're kind of away from your enemy, and then hopefully they'll aggro on it and you can, you know, run away before it gets one-shotted. I don't know, that's about the most useful thing I could think of for that spell in survival mode or in general. But their other abilities make up for it, and I feel like they definitely are better than some of the other races and more useful for survival mode or vanilla. Now we got the Ultimer, or the Highelfs. So, something you're going to notice is elves apparently all have this one ability that comes with survival mode, which basically is they don't get tired as easily. They resist fatigue by 25%. Fatigue being like your tiredness, and resisting it basically meaning like you get you're 25% slower at getting tired. Does it make sense? Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that's basically what it means. You get tired less, so you have to sleep less. It's about the only benefit they have for survival mode. Everything else is vanilla, so you know, typical, they have the 50 extra Magicka already put into their attributes. They have the Highborn ability, which is just the Hiskin and Adrenaline Rush, but Magicka form instead. That's typical vanilla. Their vanilla ability to use the Fury spell right from the rip. But this would be fairly useful in survival mode, as it can cause a distraction, and a fairly good one. Not like the familiar, to where it's a distraction that's just like, look over there, kill it, and then hopefully I'm, you know, down the fucking road before you get me. This is actually more useful because you can get higher level enemies, therefore making them a little bit stronger so they can kind of tank more attacks and last longer in the fight to distract your enemies, and they maybe have a chance to even kill off some of like your potential threats. And if they get killed, then that's a potential threat also killed. So it's a win-win. The only thing that can really go wrong with it though is if they instead just go Fury on you instead of one of their bandit buddies or whoever you cast this on. So still pretty useful. And again, they have the resist fatigue, so elves seem to not need very much sleep. That's just going to be a trend you're going to notice for survival mode. Elves don't sleep very much. Don't know. But that's the only reason why the Highelf is higher than the Breton, is because they have a better distraction and they kind of have more of a tie towards like survival mode than the Bretons did, considering the Bretons didn't have no buffs or anything really to go with it. Meanwhile, these guys can at least sleep less when survival mode's on. So that's kind of nice. But other than that, there's nothing really different going on for the High Elves. So we got the Little Wood Elf. These guys are actually fairly good for survival. They have resist poison, much like the Red Guards. They have resist disease, like the Argonians. And they have, of course, resist fatigue because they're elven blood, like the High Elves. So they have all of the combined ability, like resistances, that we've seen from past races. That's why I decided to put them above all the others, because they're a lot suited for, instead of just one thing, they resist a lot of things. It's quite useful. However, Command Animal being a once-a-day power is not very useful, and it even becomes redundant whenever you get Animal Allegiance Shout. So I just don't really feel like that power is going to be useful. A lot of people probably feel like this power is kind of useless. If it wasn't a once-a-day power, it would be kind of nice, and I feel like Animal Allegiance also shouldn't have been exactly what it was, because then it kind of just made the same power exist. So, meh. So they got a little bit going on for survival mode though, so that's why I decided to put them fairly high. They got a lot going on. So now we got the Dark Elves. Fairly high on my list because they of course have resist fatigue, because they are elf. But their Ancestor Wrath power is really what caught my attention, as it straight up says swim unharmed in freezing cold water. That's pretty nice, that it can help you in some situations. Whether it's traversing or it's just maybe escaping enemies that you couldn't normally go in the freezing water of. And also, flame cloaks in general will reduce some of your cold damage that you've already taken. So it might get you out of a bind and literally just save your life. Flame cloaks are actually in fact useful, and they're just born with one, so you don't even necessarily gotta actually use a flame cloak spell, and you could just have a life-saving thing for cold, which cold is really the one thing in survive mode that will make or break you, as it's the one thing that can actually kill you in survive mode if you don't take care of your warmth. Also, they do have resist fire. It's pretty, high quantity since it is 50%, so it's easier to get them to the max level of fire resistance. However, I don't find that there's too many enemies that are really fire, There's not fire a lot in Skyrim that you have to really worry about. So, it's not the greatest resistance, but it can still be useful. I mean, there are dragons, they do breathe fire, so I guess that's pretty useful. So, it just really depends on how you really look at it and what you really feel like you're going to be traversing and dealing with most of Skyrim. It's also noted that they have a spark spell right at the beginning of the game. Alright, finally, a human race worth playing in Skyrim Survival. Of course, Nords are 50% resistant to cold. You already knew that from, regular vanilla Skyrim. So that's pretty good. A lot of enemies use it. It's a fairly high quantity, so resistant cap, easy to reach, all that. So it's pretty good. They also have the 25 points to their warmth, so you can resist the cold environments a lot better. Putting on the right armor can make their warmth rating cap out a little bit better, so you can survive most areas for longer or just have complete immunity to it, depending on just how very cold it is. They also have, similar to how the Imperials had a very good calm spell, they basically have a very good fear spell. It's for less time, but still enough time for, them to run far away, or to give you enough time to kill a few of them. Because unlike the calm spell, if you attack them, like a bandit for instance, they all get, mad again and attack you. This will keep all of them into fear, so you can easily just sit there and kill them while they're each cowering. Or they'll, again, just run away, giving you a chance to run away too if you'd like. So this is a pretty good power to have in general, as it's basically a master fear spell you have just born with you. So all in all, Nords are going to have a pretty good time with just not dealing with one of the worst conditions in survival mode that can actually kill them off. And they also have one of the best powers in the game for race abilities, so pretty good for survival mode, and it makes sense since they're a Nord that they would be good in just Skyrim's harsh lands in general. So fairly high on this list. Alright, Khajiit. These guys are actually kinda going for survival mode. Much like Argonians, they can eat raw foods, so that's really nice. That's a thing that they just have special to them in survival mode. They also, in survival mode, will get extra 15 points for warmth. But to be honest, I feel like they should get a debuff as well, like the Argonians. At least a slight one, because just because they have fur does not mean that they're built for warmth. They come from deserts and tropical environments. Their fur is obviously insulated to keep them cool in hot environments, not keep them warm in cold environments. And as much as they complain about it in-game, I'm imagining they probably are not very warm, so I don't really think that they should have warmth resistance. However, they do, so surviving in the cold a little bit better is always a great thing, and being able to eat raw food is definitely a good thing. They also have extra claw damage, so these guys basically always have a weapon. They can do up to they do up to 22 points of unarmed damage. So that's definitely very powerful for an unarmed character. It's basically the amount of like a steel greatsword or something like that. It's very close, I imagine. Pretty powerful. Always got a weapon on these guys. However, Night Eye is basically useless and more of a disadvantage. Unless you actually have darkness mods on, then they actually make sense and are actually useful. But basically, these guys are just going to survive in survival mode a lot better because they can eat raw food and stay warm a little bit easier. And again, they are never without having weapons, whether you're a magic user or not. So Khajiit rank pretty high. However, I don't rank them as the highest because of the last and final race. Alright, last but certainly not least, we have the Orcs. So, these guys basically take every aspect you get from survival mode and reduce it by a little bit. These guys are perfect for survival mode. They just made these guys an absolute fucking beast for survival mode. I don't know why the Orcs are just like perfection at it, but they are. So, yeah, I don't even gotta go to the other three, because it's all just in one thing here. So, your Orc blood gives you 15% resistance to hunger and fatigue. So, you eat and sleep 15% less. And it increases your resistance to cold environments by 10 points. So, you get an extra warmth rating by 10. So, all of the things that you have to do in survival mode, eating, sleeping, and staying warm, they cover all those bases by a little bit just naturally. Definitely just born for survival mode. I mean, so yeah, these guys definitely make a difference in survival mode. And they were always pretty decent because Berserker Rage was a pretty OP and probably the best power you could probably have for any character. By taking half damage and doing double damage for 60 seconds. That's pretty good in terms of just their natural playability. So all in all, you're going to be able to survive just fine as an Orc in survival mode. This is like easy mode or just, lazy mode. If you're just kind of wanting to take it easy in survival mode, Orcs will allow you to do that. So that's the end of the video. That is my rating, I guess, or where I place each of the races on playability in survival mode. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please consider liking and subscribing, and Peace out.